Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us for tonight's regional coach call for the Tandem Friends Regional. It's happening here in about a week and a half. For those of you that I have not yet gotten to meet in person, my name is Emily Owens, and I'm the state director for VASO. And everything that we're going to cover tonight is to get you and your teams ready to join us at Tandem Friends School on February 21st for our Division BC Regional. So, just to kind of give you an overview of what we're going to talk about tonight. We've got kind of two segments. The first is a little bit shorter than the other, with preparations for tournament day. So, what are the things that you have to do before tournament day? Including build event signups, rosters, and other team preparations. And then the bulk of what we're going to talk about are things that will be relevant to tournament day specifically, so that you can know what to expect, what your students can expect, especially for our new coaches who maybe haven't participated in a tournament before. So we'll go over things like wristband policy, the flow of the day, um, device testing and impound, and what all those things mean, what they have to bring for chemistry events, and then what the end of the day looks like with awards and advancement to state. So let's get started. A lot of what I'm going to go over today is encapsulated in some fashion by the coach checklist. So this is the specific Tandem Friends coach checklist that's accessible by you all. And so it has those important like dates and links to things like rosters and build event signups. But a lot of the other things that I'll discuss tonight are also linked in the resources page or on event pages. So those other reminders at the bottom have a lot of other good information for you. So these are things that obviously students can access in addition to coaches. So you can point students in the direction of those sites if they have additional questions, or of course, you can peruse. I will also share the presentation that I'm going over tonight with you all so that you have all of those resources at your disposal. Um, but I try to make it like a one-stop shop, one pager for you all so you can check off those items as you complete them in advance of the tournament. One of the main things that's on the checklist is the permission form and getting rosters done. So there's a permission form that's linked on our website under middle and high school that all participants have to have completed before competition begins. And once they complete that form, their parent, or if they're 18, they can fill it out themselves, then their names from that form will auto-populate into your available students in the coach portal. And so the idea then is you can keep track of who has turned in their permission form, and then you also add those students to your regional team in the coach portal for those rosters. So if they don't have a form, you can't add them to your roster. They cannot compete without that permission form completed. These rosters are due Friday at 5 p.m. The permission form itself is pretty straightforward. It's just the parents filling in a little bit of information about the student, their grade, um, how many years they've participated in Science Olympiad. There's a couple like release questions, but it's done online, so they don't have to turn in any paper to you. They can just do it directly, and then it will populate in the coach portal for you. You don't have to input any information. So this would be like our number one task between now and Friday for you to work toward is making sure that your students have filled out that permission form and then place them on your rosters in advance of that Friday 5 p.m. deadline. So when you go to the coach portal page, um, you'll be able to, like I said, see that list of students that have completed the permission form. Under create your team. You'll click on that, and if you scroll down, you can see assign students to teams, and that's where you'll have the list of students who have completed the permission form. Each of them has a blank box under the column that says regional team. If you click in that blank box, then it'll show a drop-down menu where you can then select what team to put them on. Even if your school only has one team, you still need to do this. And then obviously, if you have two teams, then it makes sense that we have to know who's on which team. For our high school teams, it does keep track of grade, so it has a tally for you of the number of seniors, since you could have no more than 7 seniors on a given team. And then, of course, the total number of students on the roster cannot exceed 15, so it will track that for you. Um, so let me show you a brief example here. So just to make sure we're clear about where we're going in the portal to find this. So I'm logged into the coach portal. I have like a test regional set up. You can see that it says regional roster due date. So it has that date and time on the landing page for you. And then when you hit create your team, it will take you to this page. So at the very top, it says school coaches. And this is where you're going to indicate if you're participating or like going to be there on site at the tournament. We do require there's at least one school-sponsored adult who will be there. So if you're coming to the regional, then you'll just change your answer to yes. And that's how we know to make you a wristband. It's super important that any like coach who will be there has a coach portal account, and indicates yes so that they can get a coach wristband. That's how we kind of know who you are on tournament day as coaches. And also the like online functionality of the portal will allow you some key features, including appeals for tournament day. So you can indicate that you're attending. Under your regional teams, you just see all of your teams listed. Ignore the column that says track. That was for our Centerville tournament we had this past weekend. But you'll see your team numbers. Those are also listed in a bunch of other places if you hadn't found that yet. And like I said, it'll keep track of how many students are on your roster as you add them. So assigning students to teams, scroll down even further. If they've filled out the form, the parents have, then they show up on our list. And so you can click into a box and add them to a team. There's nothing that you have to like click to indicate that your roster is done. We just close it down 5 p.m. on Friday. Any adjustments that have to be made after that are going to be done Saturday morning. At the tournament, you'll just talk to me directly because I'll be there at Tandem Friends with you all. So again, please encourage your team members to get those permission forms done as soon as possible so that you can add them to your rosters and have that completed in time so that we can make our wristbands. And like I said, make sure you also go in just for yourself to indicate whether or not you are coming to the regional tournament. And we hope that you are. If you have additional coaches, like an assistant coach who doesn't have a portal account yet, I would encourage them to please make one so that I can approve them, and then they can also be given a coach wristband if they indicate that they're coming to the regional. You don't add assistant coaches in yourself. They go through the same process that you did to like create an account and then be approved by me. All right, another key piece to do before tournament day is to complete your build event signup. So these are open now for you to complete in the portal. Without signing up, teams can't compete in device testing. So really important, also just for your own schedule and planning to sign up for a spot for those build events if you're going to be participating in those. So we know when to expect you. And you can have that as part of the schedule that you share with your students. This sign up closes the day before the tournament, early in the morning. That just gives us time to print out the signups and get our event supervisors ready. But you do this in a very similar place in the portal. So if you go back to the like coach landing page, you'll see that there is a button that says schedule device testing, and you can click on that. And then for each of your teams, there's an option for you to select time. So you have to do that for your teams separately if you have more than one team. You'll go in and then you'll be able to select your available sessions. Now, obviously, this list is longer than what you all will have for your options because this has some of the state specific events. But if a session is available and has an open spot, it'll show in the drop down list for you to pick. If it seems like it skips a session in the list, that just means that session is full and is no longer an option for you. But once you've picked your desired sessions and submit them, and do that for each of your teams, there's a summary of what you picked that will be at the bottom of the page. Please make sure that you're paying attention to the written test events that your students are in so that you're not creating any conflicts and double booking them. And we'll go over the tournament schedule in depth so that you can know when to expect them to be doing certain events. Okay, so again, just as a summary on the coach portal, it's going to be that scheduled device testing button, and you can do that at any point. Tonight, some of you I know have already done it, but it is open and ready for you. All right, other things that I would encourage you to do in advance of tournament day, please make sure you share your event schedule with team members and families. Tell them when you expect them to arrive, especially if they're traveling separately from you. Again, we'll go over the schedule, but obviously that Google Sheet that's been published is available for anyone to look at. We'll talk about impound and making sure that you know what time impound begins so that devices can arrive on time. And then also, it's helpful to prompt your students, I think, to go through like a checklist, make sure they have all the necessary materials for their events. I'm not saying that like you're responsible for bringing all the stuff, but like I said, you can prompt them and say, "Hey, have you looked through your rules to make sure you have everything that you're allowed to bring?" That week leading up to a tournament can be some of that logistical work to make sure that they have what they need. So that could be goggles, it could be their cheat sheets. Sometimes even like, hey, who's bringing the device? Who's bringing the electric vehicle? Making sure that people are aware of what their partners are doing and bringing so that they don't have any like crossed wires. Someone forgets to bring something or they, duplicate efforts or something like that. It's also a good chance, good opportunity to encourage them to review the rules and to look over any clarifications, just to double check all of it. Make sure that they haven't like assumed something in their weeks of prep that turned out to be incorrect about what they're allowed to bring and do. Especially since many of our teams are traveling to this tournament, make sure families know how to contact you, especially if you're not traveling together. So rosters, build event signups, and then just sharing all of the like tournament schedule information. Those are the three big things for you to do in advance of February 21st. And like I said, the bulk of what the rest of what I'm going to talk about is about what happens on tournament day. But is there any questions that you all joining me live have for tournament day prep questions, things you have to do before coming to Tandem Friends?
So I have some questions about I guess about the device testing and scheduling device testing. Um so is is it important that I have that not like interfere with other events we have going on or other things I have students competing in?
Yeah, so one of the things that you may find helpful, um, so on the tournament schedule, which I'll be referencing a lot in kind of the flow of the day. Later on, there's these like planning templates. So let's say Division C. Let's say that I have a student who, let's say my pair of students in electric vehicle, one of them is doing rocks and minerals, and the other one is also doing anatomy. Well, I can see anatomy and rocks and minerals are in two different time blocks, and because of how I've set up the like design the planning template, like everything in the same column happens at the same time. So when I go to look at my schedule and see, okay, I'm team number 5. So anatomy for team 5 will happen in session 1, and rocks and minerals for team 5 will happen in session 2. Okay, so if they're both my electric vehicle people, I can't sign up for session 1 or session 2 electric vehicle because they're not going to be there. So that would mean I could sign up for session 3 and just make sure that I haven't double booked them. So I
Can
would,
I
oh, go ahead.
can
Yeah,
I ask can I ask a follow-up on that?
sure.
So I noticed that the impound time for electric vehicles starts at 9:30. Is that it?
Yes. Uh-huh.
Yeah, there it is. And so can someone else bring the vehicle to impound, or does it have to be the team?
It must be members of the team. It does not have to be the exact 2 students who are going to present and run the electric vehicle, but it needs to be student members of the team.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. All right. Other questions? Just about prep in advance. All right.
A question.
Sure. Go ahead.
Um, So, do the additional adults who are supervising students need to create a coach's portal account, or would they just need to be listed as additional staff members? I'm not sure.
Sure. So if your team has one designated head coach, that's fine. And like if you're just bringing additional chaperones, they aren't listed as coaches. They don't need coach portal accounts. As long as they've just done what they need to from your school's perspective about being verified as chaperones. The coach role specifically for the portal is because like saying that they're in charge of like submitting the roster, submitting the device testing, and then as we'll talk about, if there's anything that they wish to appeal during a tournament, a decision that they think maybe doesn't follow the rule as written, then the coaches are the ones who, in the coach portal, can submit um, those appeal requests on behalf of their team. But we only, like most teams, only have 1 or 2 coaches. All right, let's talk about what a tournament day looks like. So this is the Division C Tandem Friend schedule. I have the Division B one on the next slide, but they are very, very similar because they actually are gonna we're gonna have students in some of the sessions like in the same room together for both B and C. A lot of our events are very complementary across the 2 divisions. So our day starts at 9 o'clock, and you can see that it then goes till about 6 p.m. Awards starts at 5. So a full day. But it does also give us a little bit of time at the beginning of the day for potential travel. So if your teams are from out of the Charlottesville area, hopefully this means that it's a day trip for you, rather than having to stay overnight. But those are, your team decisions. But so when it says doors open and head coaches check in, this just means you're going to come to the main building on the Tandem Friends campus and receive your like coach information, the coach packet, the wristbands that match your roster. But then you'll see that 9:30 is when things actually start kicking off for the students, including some of our first written events, as well as impound for our devices. And I will talk about all the ins and outs of impound and what that means. But as you can see, our Division B schedule, really similar. Same timetable, and there is overlap. So you'll notice in the rooms that Anatomy B is listed in the same space and at the same time as Anatomy C. So we'll hopefully make directions a little simpler as they're navigating to their different rooms on Tandem Friends grounds. Um, and so we will have a mix of middle and high school. They do still have distinct, like different tests, but the lot we're keeping them in the same general testing space. So coaches are expected to arrive when that 9 o'clock time hits. Like I said, check-in will be in the main building. Um, your schedule doesn't have all that information. So this is a live Google Doc schedule. Um, I will drop the link in the chat to make sure that you're looking at the live Google Sheet rather than if you've like printed it or saved it as a PDF at any point. But like this is what it looks like right now live, and so all that information is there. Okay. The numbers in the sessions refer to the team numbers. So that tells you like when your team is competing in a given event. So you can find your team numbers in the portal. There's also a list, like you can see all of them at once, or you can see just your team's particular numbers when you create your teams. But that will guide what's happening when for your team. So every coach checks in at 9 o'clock, but then once 9:30 hits, it will depend on your team's number. So if you're team five, your team will be doing different events than team 15 in the same time block. So it's essentially like a rotation. And this is why, though, we have you schedule your build events because team numbers will, line up differently for other written events. And of course, the students who are doing those build events and how they're paired in those written events may be different for different schools. So we let you pick those, but we set the schedule for your written events. Okay. So when you check in the main building, it's just the coach who needs to check in with us. Individual students and parents don't check in with us. They check in with you as the coach. But you are checking in with Vaso on behalf of the whole team. And during that check-in time, we'll ask you to verify your rosters. So we'll have them printed so you could take a look at it, make sure everything was correct. We could fix any errors if someone was supposed to have a wristband and has their permission form, but we're added in late or something like that. We'll have you verify the count of students, and then you'll get those actual wristbands for students to put on. We'll also have maps available. Um, all right, so a couple different expectations for you about how the day is going to go from from your perspective. This was the team expectations policy that was signed in registration that indicates that coaches are expected to be there on site the duration of the tournament. They're filling the role of like the school approved adult, the representative of the school. The Tandem Friends campus is very navigable, pretty easy to get from one building to the next. So it's nice to have you reachable by phone or email, but quite honestly, we'll probably see each other in person if there's any issues. But if for whatever reason, you as a head coach are not able to be there the duration of the day, um, then we ask that you work with your school's principal to designate a replacement for the times that you are not there and let us know who they are so we can have that point of contact. So there's always an adult representing the school, endorsed by the school, um, acting on behalf of the team. I mentioned wristbands, so I want to talk a little bit about what that means. We have wristbands for our competitors, essentially for fairness, to make sure that only students who are registered on a given roster are eligible to compete and to also keep the teams from a given school separated. Because while you may practice collectively as a group with your multiple teams from your school, they actually are competing against each other on tournament day. So let's say, for example, that in my school, I have two teams. So that will be reflected on my wristband. I would have a coach wristband, has my name, my school's name, and the two team numbers that I represent. The coach wristbands this year are purple. And then my two teams will have different colored wristbands from each other. So it's very easy visually to see who's allowed to partner with whom. So if Ryan is on my Wahoo's team, um, and they have red wristbands, I, as an event supervisor, can see really easily that, like, okay, Ryan should only be coming into an event and working with someone who also has a red wristband from his school. It also has a nice like reminder for the students of what their team number is because they're going to have to put that on their test papers. So if Ryan shows up to an event and insists that Lauren is his partner, and Lauren has a different color wristband and her team number's different and it says Falcons instead of Wahoos, then I, as an event supervisor, are going to say, no, that's not allowed. You guys are on different teams. Like, you can't compete with one another. Um, so it allows us to account for the 15 student maximum on a team. It allows us to make sure that only people with permission forms are competing and that they're staying in their respective rosters as they compete. So your students will be instructed by event supervisors to like show them their wristbands when they come in to a given event. There is actually a full wristband policy published on our VASO website, um, but I'll hit the highlights for you. So, like I said, students are not going to be allowed to compete without the wristbands. They have to show them to be able to come in the room. They should be placed securely on their wrist, so they can't like slide off. We don't want them to be so tight that they're uncomfortable, because they're going to be wearing them the whole day. Um, if something happens with a wristband, it's defective or it's damaged, then they can bring the wristband to me. I'll be in the main building for most of the tournament day, and I can swap it out for you. That's easy to do. The larger issue is if we seemingly have lost a wristband, then both the student and the coach need to come find me and talk to me about what happened and how we might have lost a wristband. And then I get to determine if I think it is reasonable enough to issue a new one. Again, keeping in mind the policy to ensure that teams are competing with the correct number of students and trying to be fair to all competitors in the tournament. So, as soon as you get those wristbands at check-in, and you head to your home base space with your students, please make sure that they are securing the wristbands on their wrists, and wearing them in a way that will have them on their wrists the whole day without being like too tight and uncomfortable. And they should have their like the sticker that's on them with their name and their school and the team number visible at all times. I mentioned home base spaces. So your teams have a home base space. Some of them are shared spaces, some are not. They are listed on both in two places. In the portal, you can see your home base space, and they're also listed on a tab in the tournament schedule. So in the Google Sheet, there's a tab that says homerooms and non-event locations. You can see all the homerooms listed, including reminders of team numbers if needed. And then for some of the other information, we have the check-in space, what our score room is. We do have a prayer, meditation, and reflection space available for anyone to use on tournament day, and then also where our award ceremony will take place. So all the rooms for both events and for other uses, home bases are listed on the tabs of this sheet. But your team gets a homeroom space, a home base space. That's kind of where they can hang out and study when they're not actively in their sessions. Please tell your students, parents, anyone else traveling with your team to be respectful of other teams' belongings. of their devices, and just of their space in general, when we're sharing space, especially in like the pavilion spaces and some of the other larger rooms. It is also helpful to have an adult representing your team staying in that home base area during the tournament so that we can easily find you and ask any questions that we may have, especially if appeals are filed. Again, the Tandem Friends campus is pretty easy to navigate and easy to find people, so I don't imagine this being too difficult to find you if we need you. But the home base space is where we look first when we're trying to find coaches if we have a question. And like I said, we will have maps when people check in. Um, and everything is very like clear and like well labeled on the campus. In that space, whether it's a shared space or an individual classroom, we do ask you to be, of course, mindful of cleaning up after yourselves, making sure that the students know of this expectation. And one of the ways that we enforce that is we do have a cleanup policy. That in any event or in a home-based space, if a team doesn't clean up after themselves, we can impose a policy on the score of that event or even overall for the whole tournament. So we hope that they want to clean after themselves because they want to be good citizens and guests at Tandem Friends, but the cleanup policy reminder and the impact it could have on their score adds an additional weight to that, I think. One of the other parts of this is that we do want to make sure that they're like collecting their devices from impound at the end of the day. So just making sure they're not leaving behind an electric vehicle or a hovercraft or a scrambler or something like that. So it's not just about like the trash part of it, but also their materials and resources. With some of the team home bases being in classrooms or academic spaces, we do ask that students please not use any of the materials in the classroom. That could be things like staplers, tape, tissues, pens, etc. They should be bringing their own materials to use, using their own pens, their own paper, etc. Um, if it's a room that has a teacher desk, we ask that that remain untouched and not used, just to be mindful of the personal belongings that teachers may have around or things that they've purchased on behalf of their classroom. We do provide trash bags um, to dispose of trash, so please don't use the classroom trash bins. That's part of like the check-in packet that we give you. I think it is helpful to take a picture of the room when you first arrive so that you know exactly how to leave it at the end of the day, return it back to the original state so that it looks just like the teachers left it on Friday afternoon. That's a little harder to do in the pavilion space, but I think that one's a little intuitive about how to leave it. And there will be a number of teams in that area. All right, so you've checked in. It was 9 o'clock, and in that half hour, I've gotten wristbands to your students and getting settled in. And then session one will begin. But I'm going to start first by talking about the impound portion of session one for electric vehicle, hovercraft, machines, and scrambler. So, impound is a time where members of the team are submitting their devices and other like required items to be held by supervisors until their device testing block. The reason why we have impound for certain events is that there's information for those events that is released after impound, like a distance or a target time or things like that, where it would be unfair to teams going earlier in the day if teams later in the day were able to hold on to their devices, test them, recalibrate them, etc. once this information is out there. So to kind of level the playing field, we have teams submit those devices in advance in impound before any of their device testing begins. So, I mean, the exception here is, of course, Boomaliever. There is no impound for that, but there's no surprise information in that event. The task is very clear from the beginning. When students are bringing their device to impound, it's important that they have read the rules to know everything that must be impounded with their device, whether they have to impound the tools they intend to use with their device, if they are expected to impound any sort of logs. It changes by event, so just make sure that students have read through that. And if they're reading the national rule book, they may be perplexed that machines is on my list. This is not a typo. This is a VASO clarification that we issued where machines will be impounded. So we've separated the written and lever testing portions of the event. And so machines device is now impounded. If you're wondering what clarifications are, they're on our website. They're just as valid as rules. A lot of them are amendments to rules. You can find them either by event on the event pages, or we have all of them listed on our clarifications tab. So you can see, for example, if I select machines, you can see that we issued a clarification in December that said, at all VASO tournaments, the lever devices must be impounded. So a number of the build events have clarifications. Some written events do. Those are usually just changing like uh there was a typo or something in the national rules. But when they're looking and reading through rules, they should also be looking through and reading clarifications to make sure they have what they need. It's really important that devices are impounded because there is a significant penalty if they don't impound. Um, that could be anything from a multiplier. So, like, for example, multiply a score by zero point 0.7. So they lose essentially 30% of their score. It could mean that they're what's called tiered down, which means that they are automatically ranked below everybody else who was the, tier one device. So impound is important. If a student is not available to impound, so let's say that they're taking the anatomy test during session one and they can't impound their device. Other members of the team can do it for them, but coaches cannot impound, other adults cannot impound. It has to be team members. We do on our website, on the resources page, have an FAQ all about impound. So that's a really good resource for new coaches or to share with students if they're new to Science Olympiad, just to kind of go through a lot of the same questions that I'm answering tonight. To, have that in writing rather than making them have to listen to this video. Um, and so some things to note about like the parameters of impound. Impound doesn't is not a time where they're like event supervisors are going to tell them that their device like matches all the construction parameters. They're literally just turning it in. So all the questions about their device, the measurements, things like that, that will happen during their session time that you sign them up for. Impound, like I said, is just to turn it in and keep them in holding so that we can know that the team experience is fair across the board and throughout the day. But if you want to find this to share with your team members, on our website, really helpful page for you is the resources page. And you can see that we have the impound FAQ listed here. We have an appeals one as well that I'll show you later. So lots of good resources. And then, of course, this is where we also put a lot of our videos that are helpful, like reading the rules and things like that. Okay, so they've impounded their device, or in the case of Boom, they've held on to their device, and then they show up for their scheduled block of time for device testing. So after that, like impound period, then begins our sessions for device testing that are in parallel with those like written test events. But for device testing, when you sign them up for a session, it's not going to take them the whole session to test their device. They're signing up for the whole time, but the event supervisor will call teams one by one. And so the testing isn't going to take more than like 15 minutes. for any of these devices. And in that 15 minutes, they'll chat with the event supervisor, answer questions from the event supervisor about the construction of their device. The event supervisor will measure their device. And then, of course, they will complete the actual task of the event, the competition part of it. So all of that takes place in those 15 minutes. Excuse me. The for like hovercraft and boom lever and electric vehicle and scrambler, those are open viewing. You as a coach can go watch them. You can't say anything to them. You can't coach them from the sidelines, but you can observe, which I think is really helpful to do if you're a first-time coach and have never witnessed device testing in person. So would really recommend you make a point to see how that goes down. When they show up for their device testing, some events do require appropriate safety equipment, namely like goggles. Um, so make sure that they've checked the rules and know um, which events they're supposed to bring goggles. Like if you show up to Boom Believer and you don't have goggles, they're not going to let you test it. That's a pretty dangerous event in terms of the pieces of wood that could be flying. So we take that very seriously that they need to have their appropriate safety equipment. And then, of course, if they have other materials that didn't have to be impounded, they should bring those with them as well. So they have everything they need to be able to do the event in their time once the event supervisor calls them up. Like I said, device testing for Boom, an electric vehicle, hovercraft, and scrambler is open to viewing and would really encourage you to go check it out. There aren't any other events that are open for viewing during the day, so this is going to be your chance to get to see what's happening. I mentioned goggles. So, in the rule book, if goggles are required for an event, it will say what category of goggle is required. And most build events, we're looking at category B goggles. Chemistry events, usually category C. But what we're mainly looking for in verifying that these are appropriate goggles for the build events is the rating on them. So, category B goggles have an impact protection rating that says Z87 plus. And so we want to check to make sure that the goggles have that written on them or like engraved in them or something that's indicating that they have that plus rating so we know that they're impact rated. Okay. To help with this, on our website, on our events, I'll just show you an example. If I go to like the Boom Believer page, you can see that it says eye protection. So it says what division, is it impound, eye protection, where to find the rules, etc. It says type B. There is a national page that will link to for describing the goggles. This is also in the actual rule book. It has that Z87 plus rating. And then I also have added in this like personal protective equipment, like one pager that has some good like visuals, I think, on it. So, about what we're looking for with those ratings. And this is going to be particularly helpful with the chemistry events, but does also have info for the build events. So, just making sure that they have the right type of goggles for their competition and that they bring them with. Other things that you need to know or need to relay to your students. These policies are up on our VASO website so they can read them there. But construction policy for devices. Devices that are submitted for testing can be constructed only by members of the 15 student team. So if a student is not on your roster on tournament day, they cannot have anything to do with building that device. No parents, coaches, teachers, nothing. They can't construct any part of that device for these students. So it's expected that, maybe especially for our younger students, parents or teachers have trained them on how to use particular equipment. When it comes to actually building their device that they're going to submit for testing, the students have done it all by themselves. Now, the two students who are submitting the electric vehicle or scrambler or hovercraft for competition, they don't have to be the only two people that built it, as they could have help and collaboration from other members of their 15-person team. But if you're a school that has more than one team, Team A can have nothing to do with the construction of Team B's device. Team B people must have built their device 100% on their own. Team A people cannot have helped them construct any part of it. So they are separated. They can talk ideas, right? But when it comes to actual design and construction and implementation, it needs to be separated by team. Okay. And if you have a student who, for whatever reason, can't make it on tournament day, but they contributed to the building of a device that you're going to use, you should make sure they stay on your roster because if you take them off, then you can't use the device that they helped build. So we just want to make sure that everyone who's submitting build devices is doing it within the parameters of that 15-person team, um, and with no outside help from other students or mentors, coaches, whoever. Also, just so that you know, during impound and during actual competition, teams are not going to be allowed to use power tools. They can, of course, use them in their construction before the day, but they won't be able to use them at the actual tournament. And if for whatever reason there's any tool that our event supervisors think our students are not using safely, they may be disallowed from using that tool, even if it's not a power tool. So the tools they bring, students should know how to use them and use them safely. If multiple students on the team have contributed to the construction of a device, we ask that at least one of the like primary builders of the device is present to operate their device. So if you have like four people who worked on the hovercraft from your team, well, then ideally two of those people would be who are sent to test the device. Um, so just making sure that whoever's there knows how to operate it correctly, knows how to answer the questions about it because they were part of the construction. If other team members were part of it and there are questions being asked that cannot be fully answered by the students presenting the device, then the event supervisor may ask to talk to those students as well. And these questions are going to be, like I said, about design, about who, the construction, who did what, how did you modify this, etc. Um, because if students can't answer the questions that are being asked, then we may wonder who actually built it. If we find that the students didn't actually construct the device, then the team can be penalized, even disqualified. And we don't want that to happen. So, just in the best interest of everybody, to have the device's builders be there to run the device, test it, answer questions, etc. While the testing of the devices is happening, parents and coaches and mentors are not permitted to interfere with an event in any way, to offer advice or coaching from the sidelines. Once the students are in their competition zone and time, like they're doing it on their own. So you just have to watch. It's also, I think, appropriate to again remind that parents and coaches and mentors cannot construct anything on a competition device. They also can't test it, assemble it, or calibrate it. These devices should be with the students, calibrated by the students, cared for by the students. Um, so we are mindful of that in how we're, watching people at competition. So just make sure that that line is clear to your community members. Adults should also not touch or take pictures of another team's device. Parents and coaches are welcome to take video of their own team's devices. Don't be surprised if an event supervisor just verifies that the device that you're filming is indeed your own team, but that's permitted, but like not other teams. Okay. Also, regarding any decisions that are made, or how any event goes, build event or otherwise, please know that parents are not supposed to contact Vaso or me directly. It's supposed to go through you as the coach. So that's one of the other reasons why we have like coach wristbands for you, so that I know who are the coaches and who I can talk to. Okay. Related to that, like construction policy of, was this built only by members of the 15 student team? We do put this block at the top of every checklist for our build events and ask our competitors to fill it out. So their school and team name, their individual names, and we ask them to sign and verify that the device they're submitting for competition was built only by members of the 15 student team. It also asks some additional questions like, did they use a kit? That's okay if they did, but that's just going to prompt the event supervisor to ask additional questions about how they substantially modified the kit. Um, in their construction, because that is a part of our policy that we expect kits to be substantially modified from their original plan to change how they function for the sake of this event. So students should be prepared to answer those questions. We also ask if they've used things like a 3D printer, a laser cutter, a CNC mill. Again, it's okay if they have. We're just going to have questions about, you know, who designed the CAD file, who printed it, etc. Okay. So, because there's this top portion that we ask students to fill out, it's helpful for them to bring a pencil, bring something to write with, um, to impound and to their device testing time. So they should really just always have a pencil with them wherever they're going for Science Olympiad. This checklist, like this is the top part of the checklist. We publish our checklists in advance so students can know exactly how we're going to be evaluating their device. So this is also available on our website. So you can see, for example, like on that Boom Lever page, if I go to Vaso event checklists and score sheets under resources, it has all of our linked score sheets. So I can see exactly what the score sheet looks like, how like the rules are broken down into like true false statements or record like spaces to record things. And so this is a great tool for your students to use in their final preparations. They can evaluate their own device to make sure that it meets all the construction parameters. But you can see that box up at the top is what I was referring to that they sign off on. The rest of the sheet during competition is what's filled out by the event supervisors, but they can use it for practice. Also, if your team has competed at invitationals, please know that just because it passed at an invitational doesn't mean it's actually compliant for regionals. Our judging is more strict at regionals, and our judges are different, probably from the ones you saw at invitationals. And we take great care to train our VASO judges thoroughly. So the best way you can prepare is by using those checklists so that you're really clear on what the expectations are. They're all the same as in the rules, but I find the checklist to be like a much more user-friendly access point for that. So after students answer the questions from their event supervisor and test the device based on the task of the event, they're done with all of that. Students can take it with them back to their home base. They could put it in their car, etc. The only reason you would really want to keep the device um, in like impound with the supervisors is if you intend to file an appeal. Question in the chat. Are students permitted to use pieces or component parts of devices that are reused from previous devices they designed and built for a different purpose? Yes, as long as they built it, those components can be reused. Um, so that's totally fine to use pre-existing things that they've already constructed for other assignments, but as long as they constructed it and it wasn't from somebody else. So if you have a team that has been around for a couple of years, they can't use a device that was already constructed by previous team members that are no longer on the team, right, that have graduated. But if they're the kids who built it, they can use those components because it still fits the like nature of the 15-person team construction policy. So, like I said, you will probably take your device with you unless there's something that happens during the event that will um, indicate that you may want to file an appeal. And we hope that doesn't happen, but of course, we need to have a system in case it does. So, appeals can be initiated by coaches, or sometimes they're initiated by event supervisors. Whenever there's a question or uncertainty regarding a ruling, um, on the part of either competitor or supervisor. So competitors themselves do not initiate appeals. They have to talk to you as the coach, and then you can input it into the coach portal after you have talked through it with them and like verified the understanding of the rule that they think was violated, come up with a solution, etc. So this is why the coach portal account is so important on tournament day. On the coach portal page, there is a button that says Tournament Day Appeals. So if an instance like that happens, you click on that button and it's going to ask you to verify your contact information, just to make sure we can get in touch with you about the status of your appeal. You're actually going to get an email when there's an update to your appeal. And then it'll ask you to go through um, some key points with the students before you actually submit it. So we just want to make sure we're clear about what a successful appeal is. It has to allege that we broke a rule or that your team's testing conditions were substantially different from other teams. So it can't be you didn't like the rule, you weren't aware of the rule, or it was too challenging of an expectation or a test question. It has to be, hey, this thing in the rule book or in the clarifications, you guys didn't follow that. And so we think that there needs to be something done to fix that. It has to be filed within an hour after your team finishes that particular event in question. And if it's a build event, then we ask that you leave the device with the event supervisors because chances are we're going to want to look at it. So the form will lead you through describing the situation, asking you to specify, like point to the rule number that you think was not followed from the rule book, and then write up a solution. So it does require access to the rules. So if you don't have them locally downloaded, I would encourage you to do that before tournament day. And you need to like actually look through them with the students, or the students look through them and share that with you before it is submitted. We do have an appeals FAQ that's posted on our resources page. Again, that goes through some of that same stuff about the fact that only coaches and event supervisors can initiate appeals. It can't be initiated by a student, by a parent, and student leadership accounts in the portal do not have access to submit appeals. So it has to be the coach. And it goes through some example situations about what is an appropriate, what might be an appropriate appeal. Okay. We hope that we, like I said, don't have them, but sometimes we mess up and we want to make sure that we can have a fair tournament. But it's not meant to be a forum in which we complain about other teams and perceived advantages or benefits given to other teams. It really is about your team's experience and whether the rules were followed consistently for your team. Okay, are there any questions about device testing, impound, any of that stuff before we just talk about the written tests and the rest of um, the day? Okay. So for all the other events, like I mentioned, they are scheduled by your team number. So you just look for the range of numbers in which your team number falls, and that will tell you when your team will be participating in that given event. We don't make changes to this. There are no exceptions made to that schedule. So really, really important that teams look at that in advance and know where they're expected to be when, especially if you may be traveling like students coming in individual cars, they should know when you expect them there, whether it's the whole day or you're allowing them to come and go for their given sessions. That's up to you as the coach. So, in contrast to the build events that, you sign up for a session, but you're only going to use like 15 minutes of time in that window, the other events do pretty much use the full session block of time. And so participants are expected to be there at the start of the session to receive instructions. If they show up late, they're permitted in, but they're not going to get to make up that time. So it's important that they are punctual. And, by this point in the presentation, I always feel like I'm a broken record by saying read the rules, but I'll say it again. Make sure your teams are reading the rules and they're bringing only the allowed materials. Some events allow binders, whereas some only allow a cheat sheet to be shared between partners. Please make sure they're noting the details for those items. They should be bringing at minimum something to write with to every event. But it's also like things like what calculators they're allowed to bring. There are different types of calculators allowed for different events, so they should know that for code busters, they can only bring a 4 or 5 function calculator, but for, forensics, they can bring a scientific calculator. So they need to be prepared accordingly. And they shouldn't be just relying on what I say or what you say as a coach. They should be accessing and reading the website. They should be reading their rules. They should be reading the checklists. They should, be looking at the clarifications. All of that information is available and accessible to the competitors. So, empower them to look at that on their own and prepare for themselves. You do not have to be the keeper of all of that information, but you can point them in the direction of the resources. I mentioned the calculators. So there is a guide in the rule book that talks about the different classes of calculator. What class is allowed for which event is on each event's rule page. So one thing I do really want to highlight is that in no event are they ever going to be allowed to use their phone or smartwatch as a calculator. So they should plan accordingly to have their other calculators available. Not every event allows a graphing calculator, though, so they can't just assume that they're going to get to use that either. So direct them to their specific event pages. Okay. All right. For the chem events, just to make sure this is on your radar, for Division B, that's Crime Busters and Potions and Poisons. For Division C, we've got Forensics and Material Science. These events have a hands-on lab portion in addition to the paper-based test. They happen at the same time, but these events have very specific safety equipment required. And so if they don't have it, they're not allowed in the testing room. This is going to mean that they have to have goggles and aprons and long hair pulled back. So there's a pretty serious paragraph of text for each of those chemistry events about how they need to physically prepare to enter the testing room. There's also the allowance of a box of equipment for these events. And it's not required, but it's highly recommended. I'll show you what that list looks like. So that is also something that they need to prepare and bring with them. So this is the Division B rule book. There's a complementary one for Division C, but you can see that it has a list of chemistry lab equipment. So they can bring this for any of the chem events. So they can bring the same box to Crime Busters and Potions and Poisons. They can bring the same box to Forensics and Material Science. But it lists all the things they can, in theory, put in the box. They do not have to bring everything. But if they bring nothing, they will almost surely be at a disadvantage and be unable to do some component of the lab task. So ideally, if they've been able to practice, they'll know which things they, use for certain tasks. And so instead of bringing 17 different sizes of beakers, maybe they have three or four sizes that they particularly like. Or maybe they really don't like doing things in spot plates, so they'll just do everything in test tubes or something like that. But the list is there. Um, if possible, the students can create their own box if you give them access to these materials into your school. But to be honest, when I was coaching, just for my own sanity, I often made the box for them. But that's up to you. If you have two teams, they should have their own box for each team. Because I mean, at minimum, they might not even be standing next to each other, but in theory, right, they're not supposed to actually like talk to each other or like help each other out. So, if for transportation purposes they need to be in a singular box, then we can work that out that like they can just separate out the materials at the beginning of their event. But if possible, would like to have them separate. Okay. And once again, we have that personal protective equipment guide that's linked on the relevant event pages. And for chemistry events, this is very important. They need to have the right kind of goggles. They have to be chemical splash protection goggles. So they have to like fit around the face, and they have to be indirect vent. So this means they should not just have open holes on them. The ones on the right are not allowed. They need to have indirect vents, which for most varieties of goggle look like those knobs on the top and bottom. They don't necessarily have to be black like they are in this picture. That I just picked this picture because it's easier to see. But they have to have these angled vents for chemical splash protection, so no open holes. A lot of goggles that are chemical splash protection goggles may also have a Z87 plus rating, so they could also be used for build events. But for the chemistry events, they don't have to have that rating. But if they do, then they can be used for both purposes. For those chem events, they're also going to need a lab coat or lab apron. Whichever one they pick must cover the torso and extend to at least mid-thigh. This is in addition to the requirement that they wear long sleeves down to their wrist, long pants, closed-toed shoes. Their pants can't be too tight. They can't wear leggings. They have to be loose-fitting pants. Um, and then long hair tied back. Um, so those are all safety considerations that our event supervisors are trained to look for when students are entering the room. And if their arms are uncovered, or they have open-toed shoes, or they don't have an apron, they will not be permitted into the room. All right. I know that's been a ton of information in this fast hour and 8 minutes. But just to kind of summarize what's expected of you as a coach during the tournament day. At the very beginning of the tournament, you're doing check-in, you're helping with wristbands, and then, of course, verifying rosters. During the tournament, you just need to be available to your team. For questions, you need to be accessible to submit appeals, but I hope that you get to watch your team compete in some of the build events because that is really the most fun. And then after the tournament, it's just going to be, directing your team to clean up their space, and then you get to celebrate at the awards ceremony. But through all of this, you are the team connection to Vaso. You're the one that's going to talk to me on tournament days. If there are any questions or anything comes up. I will also share contact info with you directly for how to connect with us during the day. We have a score room text number, but honestly, like I said, the Tandem Friends campus is pretty tight knit, so it's probably just as easy to come walk and find me. It is a short walk, I promise. So we'll be well connected on tournament day. So the session six, the last session of the day, ends at 4:10, and then we have about an hour for cleanup, getting things squared away before we convene in Community Hall for the award ceremony. So it's a combined Division B and Division C award ceremony. And just to give you a quick overview of what awards will look like. So we will announce medals for each event. We will announce trophies for overall schools. So a first place trophy in Division B, and then we'll announce the top four schools in Division C. Everyone who takes home a trophy, like each of those schools, will also earn a state bid. So we'll invite them to join us at the University of Virginia on March 21st for state competition. Schools qualify for the state tournament as a whole. So individual students are not like qualifying by event. I will talk about the exception to that with gold bids. But if your school has multiple teams, it is your highest placing team that determines like your trophy and state bid placement. You're only competing against teams at this regional. You're not competing with schools that competed at other regionals. Okay. And notably, you're not locked into a given roster for state. When your school qualifies, then your state team is just any 15 students from your school. So, those are decisions that you get to make. Um, oh, good question. Sorry, in the chat, build event sign up times are different on the coaches portal from the current schedule. Follow the session numbers and I will hop into the portal and fix that. Thanks for that's a good catch, Julie. Thank you. Okay, so state qualification. We've got, five schools that will be going on to the state tournament from this regional. I did mention that there is such a thing as a gold bid. So this is the one instance in which students can qualify for the state tournament without their team. This is a great motivator for smaller teams or newer teams. If the school as a whole does not qualify for the state tournament, but they do take gold first place in an event at at our regional. Those specific students who earned that first place are invited to the state tournament to compete in that event. So an additional incentive for our smaller programs or newer programs, especially when we have those like really invested participants who out the gate are doing really well in those regional events. Okay, but for moving on to like from state to nationals, that's team qualification. This is just a fun opportunity. State is, just to repeat it again, March 21st at UVA. Okay. I do have an example, just to be clear about what a gold bid is. So this is from an example from Michigan, though honestly, we've been doing gold bids now for 2 seasons, so I can probably replace this with one of our own examples. In 2023, Hazlitt High School did not qualify for the state tournament in Michigan. However, their school did take first place in experimental design at their regional. And so the three students who were on that experimental design team were invited to come to state. It had to be those three students. There are no substitutions. And they got to compete in experimental design against the other teams um, in the state tournament. They ended up taking second place at state as an exhibition team. And so the scoring would look like this. It doesn't take away a second place from a full team who's using that for potential nationals qualification. But like I said, they get to compete, they get to show their stuff at the state level, which is really fun. So we've already had quite a few gold bids qualify from our first two regionals, and I'm excited to see more. After our award ceremony, we will post the full results on Duosmium after the tournament. So even if we're only announcing the top four in each event in Division C, we'll send you the full results, or you can find them on Duosmium that will have the full places for all 21 teams in Division C, so that they can have a good sense of where exactly they landed in every single event. All right, a couple last things for you. Tandem Friends will be running concessions throughout the day. So, if If participants and families are able to, encourage them to bring cash or be prepared for Venmo for snacks, drinks throughout the day. Also, we will have a pizza pre-order form for teams. We'll get that out to you in the next couple days. Just an easy option to have lunch delivered for you, and it also supports our hosts. Um, and we'll have the full information for that shared in that form. So there will be food and beverages. Teams are, especially like you're welcome to bring your own breakfast or whatever else they may need, but we do have options available, and it is nice to support our hosts. Tandem Friends has been an excellent host to us for multiple competitions now. And so this is one opportunity they have to fundraise for their own team. All right. What questions do we have at this point in time? Anything we want to go back and clarify? All right. For those of you joining live, I'll stick around if there are additional questions. Otherwise, I'll see you guys at Tandem Friends on February 21st.
Thank you so much for the information.
You're so welcome.